She called the cops on me for moving. Not robbing, not squatting, moving out of my own house. Within minutes, 5 patrol cars boxed me in like I was El Chapo making a produce run. All because Tiffany Blair, our HOA president / power trip in heels, decided no one leaves Willow Pine without her say-so. I guess growing vegetables and following the law was too much rebellion for her to handle. But the real plot twist? She didn't know who was inside that 5th squad car. And that mistake? That's when her HOA empire started to rot. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If you love wild, true-feeling stories packed with twist justice and just the right amount of HOA chaos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story is even more jaw-dropping, and trust me, the surprises coming next, you won't want to miss them. Now, before you assume I'm some bitter old man who hates rules and can't let go of his past, let me tell you, this all started with a dream. Not the kind where you fly through clouds or win the lottery. The kind where you make a promise to someone dying and you do everything in your power to keep it. My wife, Claudia, passed 3 years ago from ovarian cancer. She was a nurse, the kind who believed food was the first medicine and basil could heal more than just your sinuses. Before she left, she made me promise one thing: keep growing clean organic produce and share it with people who need it. Not to get rich, not for a brand deal, just to make something good grow from something hard. So when Cedar Mercy Hospital offered me a 5-year exclusive produce supply contract, I felt like her voice had come back through the soil. My little farm was about to become something worthy of her memory. That morning, I looked at her basil plant on the porch, still green after all these years, and said, "We did it, Claude. But you try planting a for sale sign in Willow Pine and see what happens." The moment I stuck that sign in the ground, Tiffany showed up faster than a televangelist sniffing a tax loophole. She floated across the street in her matching activewear and Botox glare like a Stepford ghost. "Oh, James," she cooed in that saccharine tone that always meant hell was coming in heels. "Surely you're not leaving our little community?" I kept it polite. Told her about the hospital, the farm expansion, Claudia's dream. Her smile didn't flinch, but her eyes went cold. "Moving can be complicated," she said, inspecting her French manicure like it held national secrets. "I hope you reviewed Section July 1st, SIF 14 of our bylaws. Property transitions require board supervision." I knew what this was. 2 years ago, I'd beat her in a petty HOA lawsuit after she'd tried to ban vegetable gardens, claiming they lowered property values. I'd proven they actually raised them. Ever since, she'd treated me like I'd graffitied her Lexus. But this time, she wasn't just bitter. She was building a siege. What I didn't know then was that she'd already started laying her traps. That same afternoon, a bright orange HOA violation notice bloomed on my front door like a poisoned flower. Fine. $500, 0 cents for commercial vehicle parked beyond 2 hours. It was my delivery truck parked in my own driveway for 2.5 hours. During harvest season, no less. A clause no one enforced in over a decade suddenly mattered when I decided to leave. I paid the fine, sure, but not before recording our conversation. She came to collect it herself, voice like silk-wrapped spite. "This is just the beginning, James," she hissed, not knowing my phone was recording. "You don't get to abandon this neighborhood and its responsibilities." Her words slithered like a snake in pearls. I know people, important people, and they owe me favors. It would have been cartoonish if it weren't so calculated. 2 days later, my prospective buyer backed out. Tiffany had sent out a community-wide email accusing me of being a delinquent homeowner with a list of 47 fabricated violations, complete with photoshopped timestamps and lies dipped in just enough truth to sound believable. Suddenly, I wasn't just a farmer, I was her chosen enemy. And that's when things took a turn from HOA pettiness to something colder, sharper. Like she wasn't just enforcing rules, she was trying to trap me inside my life. The moving company canceled. Legal threats, they said. Needed permits? Tiffany invented on her HOA letterhead. Then, a neighbor showed up at my back door, Fluisa Seque Quayo Morales, still in her hair from morning baking, Luisa Morales. Quiet board member, soft voice, firm backbone. "We need to talk," she whispered, clutching a worn-out notebook to her chest. "But not here. She's got someone watching your house." Luisa had seen this movie before. Tiffany had done it to 3 other families. Harassment, fines, intimidation, and then, mysteriously, her brother would buy the house dirt cheap through an LLC. Tiffany had turned community governance into a mafia side hustle, and now she'd chosen me as her next example. But, like Claudia always said, "Don't fight with fists, James. Fight with facts. Fists bruise. Facts bury." So I did what she would have done. I started documenting, and just like that, I stopped being a man trying to move and became a man trying to expose a queen in her HOA castle of lies. What Tiffany didn't know is that she'd pushed just hard enough to wake the very people who were tired of pretending the garden was pretty when it was rotting at the root. Claudia believed in 2 things: fresh basil and quiet revolutions. She was a nurse by training, but a healer by instinct, the kind of woman who brewed tea like it was science and turned our backyard into a pharmacy with roots. Before cancer took her, she made me promise I'd keep growing. Not just vegetables, but purpose. She said, "If I'm leaving, at least leave something growing behind me." So I did. After she passed, I turned our tiny plot of soil into a sanctuary. Not for grief, not just for therapy, but to honor her. And 3 years later, that little dream got bigger than I ever imagined. Cedar Mercy Hospital reached out wanting to partner for a 5-year exclusive contract to supply organic produce to all 5 of their locations. Clean food, sourced from one man who still talks to a basil plant like it's his wife. This wasn't just business. It was fate, with dirt under its fingernails. Now, to fulfill the contract, I needed more space, more land. The backyard was holy, but too small, so I decided to list the house and move out to a small plot I'd been eyeing an hour north. Quiet, sun-rich, zoned agricultural, a real shot at building something that would have made Claudia laugh with pride. So I did the normal thing. I called a realtor, staged the house, and planted a crisp white "for sale" sign right into the lawn. Seemed simple. Until Tiffany Blair rose from her HOA throne like a Botoxed basilisk in yoga pants. The second that sign hit the dirt, she materialized across the street with a cup of iced judgment and a smile that could pass for polite if you were half blind and under anesthesia. "James," she called, walking like she owned the sidewalk. "Surely you're not thinking of leaving our lovely little neighborhood?" I smiled, politely, explained the contract, the farm, the reason. Told her it was Claudia's dream. She nodded like she was listening, but her eyes had already gone cold. Tiffany isn't one of those people who gets mad right away. No, she lets it simmer. She smiled, thanked me for sharing, and said, "Well, moving can be tricky, especially with all our HOA regulations. I do hope you've reviewed subsection July 1st, 14 regarding property transitions." That's Tiffany's speak for "I'm about to ruin your life with a rule no one's enforced since dial-up internet." See, 2 years ago, she'd tried to pass a policy banning front yard gardens, called them eyesores, said they made the neighborhood look like a produce auction. I fought back with facts, reports, market data, and one very impassioned speech that made a board member cry. And I won. Proved gardens actually increase property value. Tiffany didn't lose well. She lost like a queen who found out the peasants had opinions, and ever since she's treated me like an unlicensed goat in a country club. That history never really left. It lingered like fertilizer you can't wash off. So when I saw her that day, smiling through her teeth while tapping her French tips against a Starbucks cup, I knew this wasn't a farewell chat. It was the opening move. Tiffany doesn't like disorder. And to her, me leaving without permission was a mutiny. A man fulfilling his wife's dying wish? That was just a nuisance she hadn't signed off on. Didn't see vegetables. She saw rebellion wrapped in kale. And in her world, rebellion must be fined, documented, and ultimately uprooted. That's how she's run Willow Pine for the past 8 years. With passive-aggressive emails, Sudden rule enforcement and a war chest of bylaws designed to break you before you ever fight back. I hadn't even packed a single box and I could already feel her planning the ambush. And sure enough, it started small. That evening, I found a bright orange violation on my front door. Parking infraction. My produce truck had been in the driveway for, wait for it, 2 hours and 12 minutes. The limit, buried deep in HOA subsection nonsense, was 2. The fine, $500, 0 cents. Never enforced. Until now. I paid it, sure, but I also recorded her smug little visit when she came to collect. "This is just the beginning, James," she said, in the voice of someone who thinks HOA is a branch of Homeland Security. "You don't get to just walk away from this community." It sounded less like a concern and more like a threat disguised as a cupcake. "I know people. Important people," she added, like she was auditioning for a reality show called Real Tyrants of Suburbia. I nodded, thanked her, and went back inside, but I knew the war had started. Thing is, I don't fight like she does. Claudia taught me better. She said, don't fight with fists or fury. Fight with patience, with proof. So I opened a folder on my computer called HOA Nonsense and started filling it. Screenshots, audio, emails. I didn't know where this was going, but I knew I needed a record. Because people like Tiffany don't stop when you reason with them. They stop when someone shows the receipts in public, and I had a feeling I'd need every single one. The weird part? My neighbors started acting different. Less eye contact, quieter hellos, like they'd been warned. The social weather had shifted, and I knew why. Tiffany had already started poisoning the soil, not just literally, figuratively. Whisper campaigns, innuendo, accusations that something about me was off. She was setting the stage to make me the problem before I even left. 2 days later, the buyer who'd put in an offer on the house backed out. No explanation, just gone. My realtor forwarded me an email she wasn't supposed to share. Tiffany had sent a mass message to the entire Willowpine resident list, accusing me of owing back fines, violating multiple HOA codes, and attempting to evade community responsibilities. She included a list of 47 violations, complete with photoshopped dates and documents. The reality? I'd had 2 infractions in 5 years, both from my truck during harvest. But the email made it sound like I was a walking crime wave with zucchini. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me leaving. It was about Tiffany keeping control. She wasn't protecting the neighborhood, she was protecting her throne. That night, I watered Claudia's basil and whispered what I always did. We're still growing. But in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't a gardening story anymore. This was a siege. And I had a choice, back down or root in. And if you know anything about basil, it doesn't like being pulled once it's settled. Stick around. Tiffany's next move? It makes this part look like an appetizer. And just when I thought a fake violation and a sabotaged sale were the worst she could throw at me, Tiffany decided to dig deeper. Much deeper. You're not going to believe what showed up on my doorstep next, and who came knocking. If you've ever wondered how far an HOA president will go to stop a man from leaving, the next part is where it gets real. So hit that subscribe button, drop a comment if you've ever dealt with an HOA horror, and stay tuned because the next move in this chess game, it comes with teeth. The second $500 fine showed up before I'd even finished rinsing the tomatoes. Same reason, same truck, same spot in my own driveway. This time it was 1 hour and 56 minutes, well under the 2-hour rule, but the violation claimed 2 hours and 15. Tiffany had decided the truth was optional, and the HOA bylaws were her personal Mad Libs. I flipped to section July 1st, 14 in the manual they handed out when I moved in. Tucked between landscaping limits and mailbox regulations was a line about commercial vehicles and non-essential visibility. That's what my truck was now, non-essential visibility. The same vehicle that delivered organic produce to hospitals and helped feed this community. Suddenly it was the enemy of curb appeal. Tiffany's bylaws weren't rules. They were rigged landmines with smiling stickers. and I'd just stepped on one with muddy boots. That week, my house sale collapsed completely. The buyer disappeared like a spooked deer. No call, no courtesy, just gone. When I asked my agent what happened, she hesitated, then forwarded me something she shouldn't have. It was a neighborhood-wide email from Tiffany, complete with a full incident history on yours truly. 47 infractions over 5 years, each one more ridiculous than the last. Overgrown vines, false. Improper lighting on porch, solar-powered by the way. Excessive vegetable storage in visible areas, you mean my greenhouse? She even claimed I had a pattern of emotional instability during board meetings, which I guess is HOA speak for making a good argument. The documents were doctored. Some dates didn't even line up with when Claudia was still alive. But the damage was done. In the hands of someone less scrupulous, a lie that big starts to feel like truth. Then came the phone call that told me we were past red flags and firmly into battlefield territory. The moving company I'd hired, same one I'd used 2 years in a row, canceled. Legal threats from your HOA, the manager said, audibly nervous. Apparently we need special permits to operate in Willow Pine, and if we proceed, we'll be fined and possibly sued. I told him that was nonsense. No such permit exists. He didn't disagree, but he also didn't care. I've got 4 trucks and 2 drivers, sir. I can't afford to get tied up in legal quicksand. I didn't blame him. That was the whole point. Tiffany wasn't trying to win. She was trying to wear me out, smother me in red tape and vinegar until I gave up, walked away, and let her rewrite the ending. But she didn't know one thing. This story wasn't hers to finish. The next knock at my door wasn't a threat. It was a warning wrapped in courage. Luisa Morales, board member, baker, and backbone in disguise, showed up just after sunset, flour on her apron and worry in her eyes. She held a leather notebook tight against her chest like it might explode. "We need to talk," she said in a voice that had been too quiet for too long. We sat in the kitchen, and over coffee she spilled what she'd been holding for months. Tiffany had done this before. 3 times, in fact. Harassment, fines, rumors, and just when the families were worn down and desperate, they'd receive a miracle cash offer from a local buyer. Always the same offer, always 30% below market. The buyer? Greenbrook Management, LLC. The owner on paper? Tiffany's brother. Different name each time, different shell company. Same scam. HOA tyranny turned into a business model. Control people with rules, bankrupt them with lies, and scoop up their homes on the cheap. Louisa had proof. Emails, documents, copies of forged citations, even voice memos from Tiffany whispering threats in HOA meetings. "I tried going to the city," she said, "but Tiffany's got friends there. They brush it off as neighborly disputes." She wiped her hands on her apron like she was trying to get the HOA off her skin. She's careful, but this time she slipped. I nodded slowly, because I knew she was right. And for the first time, I saw the big picture. This wasn't about me moving, it was about making sure no one escaped. Tiffany didn't run a neighborhood. She ran a fishbowl with a glass ceiling, and anyone who tried to jump out got the lid slammed on them. Hard. I copied every file Louisa brought. I scanned, backed up, and encrypted them like I was prepping for court, which honestly we probably were, but I also knew something else. She wasn't done. Tiffany was still holding a few cards. And the next move? It would be bold, ugly, and calculated. Because once a person builds their power on illusion, they'll burn the whole street down before letting someone pull back the curtain. What Tiffany didn't expect was that Louisa and I were done playing defense. We had the truth now, and it was only a matter of time before her next power move became her biggest mistake. Part 4. That's when we stop reacting and start revealing. You'll want to see how fast a queen can fall when she's built her throne on fraud. We knew she'd take the bait. All we had to do was dangle the one thing she couldn't resist: control. So Louisa and I quietly spread a rumor that I'd found a new buyer, someone ready to close fast. We made sure the gossip trail reached Tiffany's inner circle, the board members too scared or too spineless to oppose her. And sure enough, within 24 hours, Tiffany called an emergency HOA meeting with one item on the agenda: a new motion banning any homeowner from moving out within 90 days of listing their property. No legal review, no public notice, just pure, undiluted dictatorship disguised as procedure. It was so wildly illegal, I almost admired the confidence. Almost. Because this wasn't just a power grab, it was a trap. Louisa was already wearing a body mic and her phone was tucked in her purse, live streaming the whole circus straight to the Willow Pine community page. It didn't take long for the meeting to spiral. Tiffany opened with her usual performance, that syrupy voice soaked in passive aggression, thanking everyone for coming on such short notice to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. But then, something cracked. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was the growing resistance. Maybe it was just that she'd finally come to believe she was untouchable. Whatever it was, she lost the mask. When one elderly couple asked how the new rule could possibly be fair, she snapped, "If people like James Delaney can just come and go as they please, we lose everything this community stands for." And just like that, the gloves were off. She started shouting, listing fake violations, attacking residents one by one. Louisa zoomed in as Tiffany's purse fell open, and something inside glinted. A black metal object, curved and compact. Was it a knife? A taser? No one could say for sure, but the internet had opinions. Within 20 minutes, the live stream hit 500 views. Within 2 hours, Free the Farmer was trending. She must have seen it too late, must realize that her tantrum wasn't happening behind HOA doors, it was playing out live in kitchens and smartphones across the county. Because when she finally noticed Louisa filming, she lunged for the phone. But Louisa, baker by day, married to a cop by fate, backed up like a pro, holding steady. Tiffany shrieked, "You're violating HOA privacy rules!" And that, my friends, was the moment irony officially quit the neighborhood. The woman who had surveilled and sabotaged me for weeks was suddenly screaming about privacy. The comment section lit up like a bonfire at a fireworks show. Is she okay? This is real? Wait, is that a weapon? The court of public opinion had just called recess, and Tiffany's behavior was the prosecution's closing argument. She retaliated the next morning, not with words, but with silence. Literal silence. My water shut off around 6:00 a.m. My electricity cut half an hour later. I called the utility company. They claimed it was scheduled emergency maintenance, authorized by the HOA through a third-party contractor. Translation: one of Tiffany's fake companies had sent in a forged request. No power meant no irrigation system. No water meant no chance of saving my crops in 90-degree heat. So I did what I could. I filled gallon jugs from a neighbor's outdoor spigot, someone too scared to help me publicly but kind enough to turn a blind eye, and watered each plant by hand, one by one, kneeling in the dirt, whispering Claudia's name like a prayer, or maybe just to stay sane. They turned our house into a sauna of despair and dared us to sweat out justice. It wasn't just cruel, it was biblical. That night, I sat at the kitchen table by candlelight, too hot to sleep, too tired to think. And I did something I hadn't done in a while. I wrote Claudia a letter, just like I used to during her treatments, just like I did the night before her funeral. I told her what was happening. I told her about the water, the power, the live stream, the hashtag. I told her I was trying to stay patient, trying to be the man she believed I could be. But I also told her the truth. That I was scared. That I was angry. That I didn't know how to stop them. I folded the letter and placed it beside her basil plant, the last green thing still standing in a yard full of withered hope. And in that moment I realized something. They weren't just trying to kill my plants. They were trying to kill her legacy. And I wasn't about to let that happen. Not while I still had breath, and definitely not while I still had a phone, a shovel, and a reason to fight. The storm had started. Now it was our turn to bring the thunder. It happened on a Friday, just before sunset. The kind of hour that used to mean Claudia's peach cobbler and iced tea, not full-blown warfare. I was out front, trying to revive a patch of cilantro with a pitcher of store-bought water, when the first siren cracked the air. Then came the second, and the third. Within minutes, my quiet little street looked like a scene from an action movie where the farmer's market guy gets framed for treason. 5 squad cars, sirens wailing, lights flashing, boxed me in like I was cooking meth instead of compost. My son Caleb stood beside me, calm as ever, arms folded, off duty but still carrying himself like he was on shift. That calm lasted about 10 seconds, right until the bullhorn dropped. Armed suspect, come out with your hands visible, Tiffany had finally done it. She called in a false report, claiming Caleb was an armed intruder threatening me on my own porch. It was cartoonish, it was dangerous, and it was about to backfire in real time. Caleb didn't flinch. That boy has diffused more tension with his voice than most people can with handcuffs and backup. He raised both hands and spoke clearly. Officer Caleb Delaney, badge 2742, Riverside PD, off-duty and unarmed. I am visiting my father. Still, the lead officer kept his gun trained. We received a 911 call reporting a man with a weapon threatening the homeowner. I opened my mouth, but Caleb cut in smoothly. Contact Sergeant Ramon Ortiz. He'll verify. Just then, like divine comedy in khaki slacks, Sergeant Ortiz himself rolled up in his unmarked cruiser. Door popped open. Badge flashed. Stand down, he barked. That's Officer Delaney. And this call? It's a setup. We've been investigating the caller for weeks. You could feel the tension crack like someone finally opened a window in a room full of lies, but the real show hadn't started yet. Across the street, Tiffany came strutting out like the queen of bad timing, followed closely by her human scarecrow, Mike Stanton. "Arrest him!" she screamed. "He's dangerous! He's impersonating an officer!" It would have been funny if the stakes weren't so real. Ortiz turned slowly, like a man about to serve a long-awaited dessert. "Ma'am, your name?" She puffed up like a peacock at a parade. "Tiffany Blair, HOA President." Ortiz nodded. "Miss Blair, are you aware that filing a false police report is a felony?" Her mouth opened, closed, then twitched. "I saw him with a gun. He threatened me." She pointed at Caleb like he'd stolen her pearls. Mike stepped forward, chest puffed like he'd practiced in front of a mirror. "He's been casing the neighborhood. I've got pictures." Ortiz barely glanced at him. "You're Mike Stanton, correct? The one with the active restraining order for stalking your ex-wife? You know you're not allowed to photograph anyone without consent, right?" The silence was heavier than a bag of wet mulch. That's when Tiffany lost it. She lunged forward, shrieking nonsense, and slapped Caleb hard across the face. The sound cracked through the air like a branch snapping under stress. Everyone froze. Caleb didn't react. He just stepped back, professional and composed. Ortiz moved like lightning. "Tiffany Blair, you are under arrest for assaulting a police officer, filing a false report, and obstruction of justice." She started to run, because of course she did. But fate had other plans. One of her designer heels caught the edge of the garden bed. She tumbled forward, face first into the soil, landing right on top of the heirloom tomatoes Claudia and I had planted together. Her face hit them like they were witnesses in court. Red juice spattered across her blouse, and for a moment the whole street stood there stunned, watching the queen of HOA fall, literally, into the truth she'd tried so hard to bury. Mike tried to bolt too, bless his heart, but the man tripped over a sprinkler head and slammed face first into the driveway, knocking himself out cold like a cartoon sidekick who didn't read the script. 2 officers dragged them off in cuffs, and just like that, the garden was a crime scene again. But this time, it wasn't grief blooming in that soil. It was justice. As Ortiz read Tiffany her rights, neighbors emerged from their homes one by one, like flowers after a storm. Some had phones, some just had stares, and all of them saw it happen. No one could pretend anymore. No one could say they didn't know. The street that once watched silently was now a jury with eyes wide open. But what they didn't know And what even I hadn't fully grasped was that this wasn't the end. It was just the unmasking, because what Ortiz said next made my blood run cold. "We've been building a file on Tiffany for months," he told me quietly. "And what we found? It's bigger than just HOA violations. You'll want to sit down for this, stick around. The roots go deeper than we thought." The FBI agent didn't knock. He just stepped into my yard like someone who already knew what he'd find. Scorched soil, a ruined irrigation system, and a man too tired to flinch. He held a photo in one hand and a file in the other. "Mr. Delaney, does the name Judge Warren Ellison mean anything to you?" I blinked. The name did sound familiar. One of those polished types who showed up at ribbon cuttings with a too-white smile and promises about civic pride. Turns out he wasn't just a judge. He was the spider at the center of the web. Tiffany's HOA wasn't just a personal power trip. It was a cover for a 3-county real estate scheme where distressed properties were targeted, owners pushed out, and shell companies scooped them up for pennies. The judge had been quietly greasing every legal wheel she turned. When Claudia used to say, "Some people rot from the roots up," I didn't realize she meant the courthouse, too. What followed felt less like justice and more like spring thaw. Former HOA board members came crawling out of the woodwork, relieved to no longer be living in fear or silence. Some had stepped down years earlier after clashing with Tiffany's methods. Others admitted to signing things they didn't understand, too afraid to ask questions. But the floodgates had opened. With FBI pressure and mounting civil suits, the entire Willowpine board was forced to resign in disgrace. Even the HOA's insurance company abandoned ship. The bylaws Tiffany once weaponized were now being audited like crime scene evidence. When the dust settled, Louisa Morales, yes, flower-dusted, notebook-hugging Louisa, was nominated HOA president. She didn't even want the job at first. "I'm not a leader," she whispered to me. "You are now," I told her, "and this time the neighborhood gets to grow." Her first act was symbolic and perfect. She repealed the 90-day no-move clause, shredded the garden ban, and renamed the monthly HOA newsletter the Basil Bulletin. She declared every front yard garden a protected asset, and even set up a community grant for starter kits. Residents began planting again, not out of fear of fines, but from a shared desire to reclaim something real. My old enemies became weekend gardeners. The HOA's petty citations were erased, and new language was introduced that emphasized care, not control. For the first time in years, people started waving again, without the tension, without the watchful eyes. You could almost hear Claudia laughing from heaven, probably saying, "Told you it would take dirt and sunlight to fix this mess." With the civil settlement, I was finally able to move to the farm Claudia and I had dreamed about. Bought it outright. No mortgage, no bylaws, just open sky and soil that hadn't been bullied yet. I hired 3 families who'd been displaced by Tiffany's schemes. Folks who'd once been neighbors, now part of something we built from scratch. We planted everything from heirloom tomatoes to sunflower rows so wide you could walk through them like church pews. Caleb installed a full surveillance system around the property. Nothing invasive, just enough to make sure the past never snuck back through the back fence. The old basil plant, still alive, still thriving, it now sits in a glass-walled greenhouse, center stage, roots wrapped in Claudia's original apron. I water it every morning like it's sacred, because it is. Then one day a package showed up. No return address, but the handwriting, unmistakably hers. Tiffany from prison had sent me a letter written in pink crayon on the back of a Waffle House napkin. "You haven't seen the last of me," it read, with a lipstick print next to her signature like a deranged wedding invitation. I scanned it and sent it to the FBI. The agent responded in 10 minutes flat. "We'll add this to her parole file. Also, we're keeping the napkin, it's evidence, and comedy. Even federal agents, it turns out, have a sense of humor. That's the thing about poetic justice. Sometimes it walks in wearing cuffs, sometimes it arrives with gardening gloves. Tiffany planted fear and fines. We harvested unity and heirlooms." So here I am, months later, standing in the middle of our greenhouse, sunlight pouring down like grace. Kids run through the rows, laughing, workers trade recipes, and Claudia's basil stands tall like a survivor with something left to say. And I've got one last thing to tell you. Justice didn't just visit Willow Pine, it stayed for dinner and brought basil. Stick around, you never know what might grow next. And as I stand here now, hands in the soil Claudia once touched, sun warming the back of my neck, watching a basil plant outlive the woman who planted it and the tyrant who tried to kill it, I realized something. This wasn't just a fight about property lines, bylaws, or board meetings. It was about legacy. About how we honor the people we've loved by refusing to let bitterness grow where something beautiful once bloomed. Tiffany planted fear. We grew community. She tried to fence us in. We tore the fence down and built raised beds. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you. Because maybe the real reason stories like this matter is simple. They remind us that one good person standing up with patience and truth can turn a neighborhood around. And maybe, just maybe, you listening now are that person in your own corner of the world. So let me ask you, what did you take from this story? What part hit home? Was it the garden, the fight, the justice, or just the basil? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. I read every single one. Hit that like button if you believe in neighbors, second chances, and the power of standing up for what's right. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, because I promise, what's coming next? The twists only get wilder and the justice even sweeter. All right, your turn. What kind of story should I dive into next? More HOA madness, workplace takedowns, or maybe a surprise twist that no one sees coming? Drop your ideas in the comments below. I'm building the next episodes based on what you want to hear. And hey, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn on that bell so you don't miss the next jaw-dropping story we've got coming.